What's up guys, Tim Little. Welcome back to Tactical Bassin. Today's video we are talking pond fishing, going in depth for you guys from beginners to advanced. I got some tips that'll help you guys catch more fish next time you're out at the pond. Pond fishing. I love talking pond fishing because that's going back to my roots. That is where I started. You know, I didn't have parents that had boats or anything like that, but I did grow up on property around other ranches that had ponds. So I went and got permission and fished as many ponds as possible. So doing these types of videos, it takes me all the way back to childhood days and great memories. So if you are a kid out there pond fishing watching this video, keep it up, man. Some of the best fishing you'll ever have is pond fishing. Now, I got baits laid out all over the place. I don't know if you could they're probably not all in frame, but all different types of categories and techniques. And I'm gonna go through each of them and explain why I picked them. You know, honestly, to set up for this video, all I did is walk in the garage and think, what would I wanna take if I was going pond fishing today? So I got a few different techniques, and I'm gonna go through it and explain why. But first, let's talk about pond fishing. You know, primarily when I think ponds, at least out here on the West Coast, to be honest, I haven't fished many ponds back east or in the South, but out here on the West Coast, typically springtime moving on, most of our ponds are gonna have grass in them. So typically when I think pond fishing, I think weedless baits, Texas rig baits, topwater baits, stuff like that that doesn't have necessarily exposed hooks, unless I know the pond that I'm going to has deep water and that I could fish those grass lines. So right off the bat, when I think pond fishing, I think Texas rigged, weedless. So I grabbed some creature baits for you guys. Again, beginners to advanced. If you guys have never gone pond fishing before, down below in the video description, I will link baits, colors, hooks, all that stuff that you will need to get started. You advanced guys, you guys probably will know about some of these baits, but definitely check them out because they are tried and true. So right off the bat, I'm gonna go with some kind of a creature bait. The two baits that I grabbed, one's gonna be this guy right here. This is the Reaction Innovations Man Bear Pig and the Zoom Brush Hog. Very good baits, and they really shine in ponds. Now these are gonna be rigged Texas rig. You're gonna take your favorite Texas rig weight. You can peg or not peg, but the benefit of these, you can fish them deeper. Typically when I'm pond fishing, honestly, I start out with a reaction bite. I wanna see how aggressive the fish are. But if you're just beginning and just getting into it, start with these guys right here. They're very easy to rig. You take again, I will link everything down below in the video description, but you take an offset, like a 2/0 or a 3/0 offset worm hook. You run your bullet weight up on your line, and then you just rig this through. If you guys don't know how to rig a Texas rig, Google it. We have videos on it as well. But boom, there you go. So you beginners, break free the appendages. You beginners, if you're going out, go out, throw this in the deepest part of the pond. That is typically where the biggest fish are gonna hold and the most fish. And you're gonna let this hit bottom and just drag it. These appendages down here, these little curly tails, they're gonna do a little bit of movement. And pond fishing is so much fun because the fish are usually super aggressive. So you guys starting out, start with a brush hog or a man bear pig, and you guys will catch fish. Now, I just touched on it a little bit, but when I come to a pond, some of the first things that I look for, one is water clarity, two is vegetation, and three, the dam. I want to know how deep, how big that dam is, because you can't really figure out how deep the water is unless you cast out and count down a jig or something like that. If you walk up to a pond and you look at the backside of the dam and it's a giant dam, you know it's typically going to be deeper. Look at the kind of the topography around the dam If there's big, steep walls, you know it's going to be a sheer deal. It's going to be very deep. If it's just a pasture that's kind of flat, you're probably going to be very shallow. But start off with these guys, for you beginners, because that is hands down the best way. A Texas rig, a creature bait is going to be the best way you catch fish in a pond. But for me, now that I kind of talked about what I analyze, water clarity, vegetation, and how deep it is, I start with reaction. One, because I love it, but two, you get to quickly figure out how many fish are in the pond, how aggressive they are, and how big they are. When I pull up to the dam, or I pull up to the pond, I should say, and I pick up a swim bait, either a flashy swimmer or a chatterbait or some kind of topwater, you know, maybe even a buzz bait, I'm just burning water, right? And I want to see how aggressive these fish are. If I throw that buzz bait out, or I throw that whopper plopper out, and I'm getting multiple blowups on it, on the, you know, per cast, I know it's game on. But if I don't get any bites, and then I try the chatterbait, then I try the swim bait, then I try a spinner bait, and I don't get bit, that is when I transition to soft plastics like a fluke or a shaky head or a big ribbon tail worm, the creature bait. So kind of going through this, my mindset when I pull up to a pond, but I start off with reaction and typically topwater. I like topwater because you can cover a lot of water. Again, you don't know the bottom layout, the contour layout of the pond typically, but I will typically start by the dam. That is the deepest area. I will fish around that, and then I will move into the shallows where there's vegetation and there's cover like grass or laydowns, that sort of stuff. So right off the bat, I start with topwater. And I don't start with any topwater. I start with something that I can cover a lot of water with. Doesn't necessarily have to be a hard bait. It could be some kind of a toad style bait. This is the Rage Toad by Strike King. Horny toad, something like that, where you cast it out and you just burn it across the surface. Again, you're wanting to learn the temperament of the fish in that pond. You're wanting to see how active they are and see if they will commit to topwater. Obviously, things that come into play, your weather, you know, if it's snowing out there or it's super cold, there's ice just coming off, it's just thawing, you're probably not going to want to start with topwater. Go with a swim bait, go with something a little bit more subtle, but still reaction. All right, so I talked about the topwater, and topwater for me is probably the biggest category for pond fishing because there's so many different styles, but I'm going to keep it really simple for you guys. Buzzbait, whopper plopper. If I am fishing a pond that doesn't have anything on the surface, no vegetation, no grass, or some kind of, you know, whatever, cheese mat, whatever you want to talk, you know, whatever you want to call it, I will start off with a buzzbait. Fire it out there and just burn it. Now, if there are lanes, if there is vegetation and there is cheese or whatever type of grass or cover on the surface, I will go with something that I can actually stop. A whopper plopper is perfect because I can fire it out there. I can pick my lane in that grass, whatever it may be. Pick that lane, plop, 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 stop. Plop, 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 stop. You know, buzzbait, if you stop reeling, it sinks. You're gonna get all caught up in the vegetation. So I will go with a whopper plopper, typically some kind of bluegill pattern, but we'll touch on that in just a little bit. Same thing with the soft plastic, the rage toads, or the horny toads. If you let off the gas on the reel, they're gonna sink. So that is primarily the moving baits. Then I will switch to poppers and frogs. Again, vegetation, no vegetation. A popper, especially like a baby bass color or some kind of bluegill color, those are phenomenal on ponds. Typically, you can get away with throwing it on a spinning rod, so you beginner fishermen, if you want to get into topwater fishing, you can throw this on your favorite worm rod as well, and you don't have to break the bank and go get a technique-specific rod. Some of these other baits you will, and again, I'll link all that stuff down below, but vegetation, non-vegetation, but slow. The frog, Obviously, you're working a frog on the grass lines, on the cheese, through the laydowns, the branches, whatever it may be, open water, and slower. Two of my favorite poppers, this is the Rio Rico, and this is the Bubble Popper by River to Sea. So that is Topwater. That is typically where I start. And guess what? If I don't get bit on that after I've kind of ran through the different types, then I go subsurface, but I still stick with reaction baits. So you'll kind of notice I mentioned vegetation quite a bit, because most of the ponds that I've fished, it doesn't matter if they're super clear water, gin clear water, or muddy, a lot of them, most of them have some type of grass, some type of vegetation subsurface. So if you're not fishing weedless or Texas rig, you're getting hung up and you're always just hung up in the grass. So some of my favorite baits to avoid that or to fish through that, number one is going to be a flashy swimmer. Now you guys have seen some of the pond fishing videos we've done recently. I caught a bunch of fish on this guy right here. If you guys haven't, I'll link that video down below in the video description and up here. But this is a 4.8 Kitech in Sun Girl color, rigged on a owner flashy swimmer. It is Texas rigged, so it is semi-weedless, and the fish eat it. Real quick, most of the ponds that we fish, we have bluegill in. We don't typically have shad or anything like that. Depending on your pond, match the hatch. You know, if you have golden shiners or you have something bigger, definitely switch your colors out, switch out your sizes if you need to, but typically bluegill colors work great. So a flashy swimmer, straight up swim jig. This is an Alabama Bream California swim jig, no jack hook, paired up with that Sungill Kitech. That thing is awesome. It's heavy enough, it's got a heavy enough weed guard that you can literally throw this into cattails or reeds or whatever vegetation you have on the outskirts of your pond and come right through. That is awesome. You can throw it on straight braid. Another guy for you is going to be a chatterbait, and then a spinnerbait. I kind of listed those in order. I will go a swim bait, a flashy swimmer, and then I will jump over to either the swim jig or the chatterbait, depending on if I feel like the fish have seen a chatterbait before, then I will go swim jig. If not, I will go with some kind of vibrating jig. And again, down below, I'll link some of my favorites from budget friendly all the way up to this guy right here. This is the Evergreen Jackhammer. You guys know about this bit. You know how awesome it is. But I will link different price points for you down below. So now that we've went through Topwater, I've went through reaction, I fished the dam, I started the dam, and like I said before, typically the dam is the deepest part of your pond. That's where your biggest fish in the pond are going to be, and your fish are going to be congregated too. Because as we're coming into spring, we're coming out of winter, you know, the deeper the water is going to be warmer down there, so all those fish are going to get out of the shallows and go deep. As we start moving from spring into summer, those fish are going to move up to the shallows. That's where you're really going to get them on the frog, on the Texas rig, creature bait, that sort of stuff. So we've talked about Topwater, we've talked about reaction. One other reaction bait I want to talk about real quickly before we move into Finesse, and then we'll wrap it up. If you guys are pond fishing and you guys do not know what a fluke is, or if you haven't thrown a fluke, you definitely need to. We've done several videos on fluke fishing, but what this is a soft plastic jerk bait, and it's made to mimic a dying bait fish. The cool thing about it, obviously this is a big one, this is a giant super fluke, but you can see how it's rigged weedless. I have that rigged on an owner twist lock hook, and you can throw this into the grass. You can work it like a Topwater, skip it across the surface, or let it fall down through the grass, and you can rip it through that grass and it'll dart through and not get hung up, so you can effectively fish that vegetation a lot easier. Again, pond fishing, typically you're going to be fishing around grass. So there you guys have it. That is reaction. Now let's switch gears and go finesse, because if all this doesn't work, you definitely need to transition into finesse. Maybe the fish are a little bit deeper, maybe they're line shy, whatever the situation may be. The next route that I'm gonna go, I'm kind of going through the process with you guys. I'm gonna go with a weightless stick bait. Either a Senko. This is actually, where's it at? It's a big bite. This is actually the wacky stick. This is tilapia color. But what's cool about these guys, they actually have an O-ring built into them. So if you guys want to wacky rig, you can actually hook right through this O-ring that's molded into the bait. Kind of a cool deal. But either the big bite, the wacky stick, or the Yum Dinger. It's a fabulous stick bait, pretty inexpensive, or a Senko. But again, like I said, primarily all this stuff is going to be rigged weedless. So if I'm pond fishing, I typically don't fish a wacky rig Senko. I go Texas rig. I think I pulled the hook out that I had rigged up, but I'm going to go Texas rig. Same thing with my worms. Doesn't matter if it's a big ribbon tail or some kind of like trick worm. This is the T-Mac. Again, phenomenal bait. Texas rig that, put your favorite shaky head on there or your favorite bullet weight on there. Rig it Texas rig, you'll fish it through the grass and you will catch fish. And then last but not least, we talked about this guy right here. Either the brush hog or the man bear pig. Two completely different baits, kind of the same style, different actions, but either or is a must and they flat out catch them. So definitely check those out. If you want, I brought a rod out. This is a drop shot. Drop shots definitely work. You just got to make sure that you rig it with some kind of Texas rig hook, some kind of either a straight, a rebarb, or that is actually the this is the cover shot. Both hooks work great, but again, key is vegetation. So kind of wrap it all in again. When you get to the pond and you've never been there before, scope it out, maybe check it out before by Google Earth or something. Make sure you have permission, obviously, but check out the dam. See how big the dam is. Look at how it lays out, the surrounding land around it. Again, if it's points or canyons, it's going to be a fairly deep pond. If it's like a pasture, pretty flat, then it's obviously going to be pretty shallow. Start with a reaction, unless you don't have confidence in it or you don't have them with you. Start with a reaction, typically top water, then swim baits, and go through the gamut. Then do your soft plastic jerk baits. That doesn't work. Try your finesse baits, your weightless stick baits, your ribbon tail worms, and your creature baits. Each individual category has its own place in pond fishing. They all have a place to shine. That's why I covered everything. Typically, ponds aren't pressured very often or too much. So usually the fish are very aggressive and you could have some of the best fishing that you'll ever have pond fishing. You know, some of my best memories are just grabbing a rod by myself as a kid and just going and hitting the neighbor's pond and catching tons and tons and tons of 2 and 3 pounders. It's just so much fun. And you dads out there, you moms out there that have kids that want to get them into fishing, some of the best things you can do is visit a pond and get them catching bluegill or bass, because that will get them hooked. When kids are fishing and catching, it definitely helps. When they're just fishing and not catching, they tend to lose their attention. There it is, guys. That is my, I don't know, all of my pond fishing baits. Kind of walk through the process with you. I talked about some of the key things to look for, but based on how deep it is, your water clarity, and vegetation. You know, water clarity, if it's clear, you can get away with light line and finesse baits. Fish are going to see those baits coming from a long ways away. If it's muddy, go with something with some sound, some whopper plopper, a buzz bait, a chatter bait, something with some flash. But all of these things right here, if you have a box with the majority of these in it, or a backpack with the majority of these things in it, no matter what the circumstances are, when you roll up to your pond, you will be able to catch fish. If you guys have any questions, please leave it down below in the comment section. Down below in the video description, I will again link all of this stuff, some of my favorites, some budget stuff, rods and reels, all that good stuff. And we appreciate you guys. If you guys haven't already, Please like and subscribe to our channel. We do 3 videos a week, sometimes 4, 5, and 6, depending on the week. But as always, guys, we appreciate you. Have a good one.